everybody, it's Kelly and Jason from Ready Set Drone. We have produced 2 videos today. One is a long version of detail about everything you ever wanted to know about batteries, LiPo batteries in particular, and very good explanation so that people can really understand what it is they're buying and optimize the battery they're using and be safe with them. We decided we should also do a short version just to cover the very basic things you need to know in case you don't want to watch the whole thing or in case you've already watched the long one and you need a refresher. So, Jason, let's. I'm going to do some rapid-fire questions.
You bet.
Let's see if we can keep this under 5-10 minutes. So, first question: batteries have an S number with them. There's a 1S battery, a 2S. I know, for instance, with the Phantom, they went from a 3S to a 4S
Correct.
recently. Why can't you use the old Phantom batteries? Because they went from a 3S to a 4S, and why is a 4S better?
Sure. So the number S refers to the number of cells that are in a LiPo battery. And specifically with LiPos, it's actually a fabric that's wrapped into these bundled these little cells. And it's directly tied to how much voltage you're going to get out of the battery. So a single cell is going to provide you a nominal voltage of 3.7 volts. And nominal means that's basically its average voltage.
So a 2S would be 7.4, and
Yep.
a 3S?
3S would be 11.1, and
Okay.
4S 14.8, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and so ultimately, that you can think about the S as like the amount of water that's in a tank and how much capacity it has to push through. So basically, you have everything from these tiny little 1S to all the way up to bigger.
They make 12S's, which is insane. Yeah.
Okay, but most common for racers and such is 3S.
3S,
right?
yeah. You'll see most of the times, batteries about this size, and they'll almost always be 3S. Mostly with these racers, people either use a 3S or a 4S.
Okay, so getting into the milliamp hours, the mAh.
Sure.
What does that mean?
So this is directly related to essentially the capacity of the battery, like how much water is in your tank, right? And sometimes you'll see it represented as amps. So like this says 1.3. It's really 1,300 milliamp hours. Sometimes you'll see it represented in thousands. But we're talking about amps here, and we're talking about the amount of juice you're going to be able to get out of the battery, which is roughly tied to how long it's going to last in the air.
Okay. And then the other big number that I always see on these is the C rating, which I used to think was cell, but now you know that cell is actually S because they're wired in series. That's where they get the S from. What is like a 20C or a 40C battery? What does that mean?
So C is really related to the current you can draw safely from the battery at any given time. The best way is to think of it as a multiplier number. I would take the C rating and multiply it by the amount of amps that the battery can hold. And so in this case, this is a 1.3 amp battery. I would take 20 times 1.3, and that would give me a total number of amps I can safely draw from the battery at any given time. So if I was going full throttle, that's the amount of current I could suck out of a battery safely, meaning without probably overheating it or that sort of thing. So you can do the math there. It's helpful in sizing the battery that you want to get. You can do some math on how much amperage the motors draw and that sort of thing and get a total amperage at maximum. Size your battery that way. Sometimes you'll see a burst rating. Sometimes you'll say 25C to 50C burst. That means the battery can safely handle that amount for about 10 seconds at a time without anything going too crazy.
But a 50C isn't necessarily 50C battery is not necessarily better than a 25C battery.
Exactly, because that's burst rating. In general, the higher C rating, they're going to be more expensive. And if you can afford a higher C rating, you want to get it.
Oh, okay.
Especially if you want to do anything crazy, right? I mean, the more current you're able to draw, the more you're going to be able to do, a more acrobatic flying and that sort of thing. But on average, most batteries are 25 to 30C anyway. But I would look for one that's a little higher base C that could maybe burst to 50.
Okay, and then I think another really important thing to cover, and I think we still have some time, is these connectors on the end of these batteries. So what's the difference between these two, and how are they used?
Sure. This is called an XT60 connector. They're almost always yellow. Sometimes I've seen some black ones. They're always going to be female. It's the most common connector you're going to see these days. It's really become the most popular one in most RC models, especially quadcopters and hexcopters and that sort of thing. There are other connectors, but these are the ones you're going to find. You can always get adapters if you need them. This is obviously where your power goes, right? It's pretty straightforward. It only fits one way, so it's pretty hard to mess it up when you're plugging it in.
Yeah, it's got that little triangle on the end.
The other one that you'll see is what's called a balance connector. And essentially this is used when you're charging the battery. And what it does is most decent chargers will try to put the same amount of charge in each cell, so you've got an even charge across them. And that's what this little guy does. You'll notice this is a 3-cell. I have one ground wire and I have 3 wires because there's 3 cells. But you can also use it for like battery monitors on the back of your quadcopters. You can power LEDs with it if you want. because it actually does provide power.
Okay, yeah, and ultimately, the important thing to remember about the balance connector is that it actually goes, one wire is going to each of the cells in addition to a ground. And so you can tell here this is a 4S battery because it has 4 wires and a ground.
Correct.
That means that you're ultimately going to be able to discharge those or monitor each of those cells
monitor each
individually.
Cell, charge each cell at the same rate.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, that's very important. And then I guess the last thing, kind of just basic 101 on safety with these things.
Yeah, don't burn your house down. Good advice in general.
Yeah.
Definitely get some of these at a bare minimum. These are LiPo safe bags. They're basically flame retardant bags. You can store them in it. You can also charge them in it. You can kind of put them in there and run the wires out. They make extension cords for these little guys, which are really handy. You can get extensions for both.
To run out of the
bag. Yeah, you could actually put it in the bag and run it all the way to your charger. Those are a very, very smart thing to have. They're inexpensive. But at a bare minimum, this will help keep you a little safer. I would also recommend maybe storing them outside in your garage. Not outside where it would get too hot, but maybe in your garage, maybe in like a cinder block or something like that.
Well, because heat is ultimately the enemy of these things, right? Because just like they're chemicals, and the chemicals react more in the heat.
If it gets punctured or squished, you're in trouble. It will probably heat up. If it's overcharged, if you don't have a good charger and it doesn't cut off in time, or you intentionally overcharge it, that's bad. It could catch fire. You also don't want to discharge them too much. The general rule of thumb is leave about 20% of the battery in there. Most beepers you get for your quads will go off at about that time, but you can measure it when you fly and get your average flight time. If you start discharging too much, it can damage the cells. It'll swell up, and at that time it's
puffy-looking
at
batteries.
that time it's bad news. You want to get rid of the battery.
And then also, let's talk a little bit about this charger.
I would highly recommend investing in a decent charger. I think this one was around $80, but it's worth it. You can get some that will charge multiple batteries at once, which is also really nice. But this is a very reliable one. It'll charge 1S all the way up to, I think, 5 or 6S. It's got an LED display. You can tell it exactly how much I want to put into the battery. You can monitor the battery voltage and all that sort of thing. It'll beep when it's done. Highly recommend it. If you're going to get serious about it, I would not live on a cheap charger for all of your batteries.
Your battery should last longer if you're using a charger like this, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a higher quality. It's always going to get a balanced charge, that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, we have done a longer version, probably about 45-minute version of this video, as well as this short version. So if you enjoyed this short version and you would like to know more, watch our long version. Also, please subscribe to our channel, Ready, Set, Drone, on YouTube. And we enjoyed letting you learn from Jason, as I always do. He's a smart fella, and glad to have him here. And we hope you enjoyed the video. Like it on YouTube. Visit ReadySetDrone.com and tune in next time for our next video.
Thanks a lot.